Good afternoon. I'm Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, and I have the great honor and privilege, along with my co-counsel Steve Maturo, to represent Ladonna Paris and her family in a lawsuit that we're going to be filing right after this press conference. And we're here today because back in October, Miss Paris, a 70-year-old great-grandmother, a poet, a seminary student, I was dealing with a mental health crisis. Unfortunately, she's been diagnosed and been dealing with late-stage bipolar disorder, something she's been dealing with for a couple of years. And she was having an episode here in the city of Tulsa. And the Tulsa Police Department showed up at a scene where she was. They knew she was having an episode. How do we know this? Because everything I'm telling you is on video. And this video is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life, where you had police officers, plural, happily taunting a woman that they knew was in a mental health crisis. They were saying things like, "This is going to be so much fun." I wrote these down because I thought it was so important that I give you the exact quotes that are contained in the videos and in our lawsuit. Telling her, "This is going to be a good time. We're going to pepper spray you." Saying, "I love my job," as they banged on the door, causing her, Miss Paris, to be in fear of her life. Saying things like, "I'm going to kick this door down and rip you out of there. This is going to be so much fun." Telling Miss Paris, when they actually knocked down the door, kicked it down, knocked her down, bloodied her face, drug her out as if she was some type of violent criminal. This woman has no criminal record. They knew she was, as they call her in Tulsa, 85, meaning they knew she was having a mental health crisis. And yet they treated her like a dog. Then they took her outside. They refused to give her any water. They took her dog, her little dog Coco, who she's had for a decade, who she adores and loves and takes everywhere. They caused her and accused her of animal neglect. They took her down to the Tulsa County Jail, where they put bogus, trumped-up charges, felony charges, 9 charges on her, bogusly, that caused her to be, instead of going to get the mental health and treatment she needed, she was booked in. This woman, this great-grandmother, was booked into the Tulsa County Jail. And she stayed there without any treatment for not 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but for over 4 weeks, over a month time, was she in jail over some bogus charges. And two of those charges was finally dismissed by a Tulsa County judge in the, quote, interest of justice. So that's why we're here today. We're also here today because when this issue came to the public back in March, the Tulsa Police Department, the City of Tulsa, Mayor Bynum, they all looked at the video and said what happened was within policy. They all looked at the video and said what happened was okay. They all looked at the video and said these officers did exactly what we teach them to do. We cannot stand for that. This is ridiculous. It is a blessing that Miss Paris has actually survived this encounter, but as she's going to talk about, she's down dealing with emotional and mental injuries that are ongoing and causing her problems today. And that's why we're filing this lawsuit. That's why we are suing the City of Tulsa, the officers, and Mayor G.T. Bynum. Because make no mistake about it, Mayor G.T. Bynum is the final policymaker in this city. He has been put on notice for years that this type of activity happens to people having a mental health breakdowns, and particularly if they're African American. He knows this, and he has done nothing, zero, to stop this from happening to people like Miss Paris. And that's why he's named in this lawsuit, and that's why we look forward to prosecuting this case and getting the justice that Miss Paris and her family so richly deserve. I'm going to ask my co-counsel, Steve Maturo, to say a few things, and then you'll hear from Miss Paris.
So as Mario went into, it's a shocking case. It's going to be available for the media, for the public to be able to see the video, to see this outrageous conduct. I think one of the things to keep in mind, it's highly predictable that law enforcement is going to come into contact with individuals that are suffering from a mental health crisis. That's highly predictable. Those are situations which we can't just pass off and say, you know what, that's just 1 out of 100. No, it isn't 1 out of 100, and it wouldn't be okay even if it was 1 out of 100. But the point is, it's highly predictable that they're going to be dealing on a regular basis with individuals that are going through a similar crisis one of the things that law enforcement throughout the country have got to be cognizant of, have got to be aware of, is the opportunities when they're interacting with citizens, with the general public, to de-escalate issues. This is a textbook example of an absolute failure to de-escalate. If anything, this is a textbook example of escalating a situation that doesn't warrant it.
Yeah.
You see a situation where somebody is in their weakest, most vulnerable moment. You seize upon that moment. You bully, you harass, you intimidate. It's not what's necessary. And situations like this where law enforcement unnecessarily escalates a situation, that's how injuries happen. That's how deaths happen. When counsel says that she's lucky that she escaped this with just the injuries that she had, with just the time in jail that she had, he's right. He's right. A lot of people don't. When things escalate unnecessarily at the hands of law enforcement, these outcomes are bad. So when the city of Tulsa comes forward and the city of Tulsa says, you know what, we want to be a part of a responsible community that has a good relationship with law enforcement, well then show me, because what I'm seeing here and what we've seen in the past years is not an opportunity for law enforcement to get along with the public. It's not an opportunity for law enforcement to find trust in the public. So actions speak louder than words. And if you're not going to have any oversight, and if you're going to say that this is consistent with the policy, then you're going to have to explain that to us, and you're going to have to explain it to the public. Because at the end of the day, there should be de-escalation policies. And if you've got them, then how is this within the policy? Tell me how that failure happened. And if you've got something that addresses the mental health that's going on with an individual, and that they're supposed to be treated humanely and with courtesy, tell me how that's within the policy. Because apparently I'm not understanding the actions of this officer and how that's consistent with policy, or that's consistent with the goals of the drive that the city of Tulsa has with respect to wanting to establish a rapport and a good, healthy relationship with the community, because this is not how it works.
Thank you, Steve. And before you hear from Ms. Paris, I want to be very clear when we say that the city has been put on notice. If you take the words of current Tulsa City Councilwoman, Chairwoman, Laura Wright, who said on March 30th, 2022, during a city council meeting, that the conduct that we saw on video with Ms. Paris, this is her quote, "The most disturbing thing about this video, besides the disgusting abuses that any one of us could be subject to on our worst day, is that the officers knew that they were being filmed and still behaved in this way." She goes on to say, "What we've been told time and time again is we gotta watch the body cam so everyone can have multiple viewpoints and really see. And don't watch the edited one. Watch the full 5-angle, 60-minute playback. And then she says, we can watch that playback and still see an officer who is taking joy in taunting and torturing one of our own citizens on their worst day, knowing that they were being filmed. That speaks to culture. That is practice."
True.
That is why this case is so important. Because as Steve said, this is a microcosm of what people like Ms. Paris deal with here in the city of Tulsa on a day in and day out day, each and every day. We have these calls to our office. We get so many of these calls, there's no way we can actually take even all the calls we receive on this type of conduct. And when you take what Lord Wright, the city council chairwoman, said versus what Mayor Bynum said, when he said, he's quoted as saying that he knew about this within a month after it happened. But he's confident in the Tulsa Police Department investigation. An investigation that found that these officers didn't do anything wrong. But he's confident in that. So now we hear from Ms. Paris and her family, her daughter Kendra, her son Chris, and her son Cash.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming. And again, my name is Ladonna Paris. And I haven't spoken out before about what happened, but I feel it's very, very urgent that I do that. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. So many people do suffer from mental illness, and I've never had anything at all happen to me like this on that day, October 25th. And it's a day I will remember forever. I always told my children when they were little, the cops are your friends. If you're ever in trouble, go to a cop and talk to them about it. Well, I found out on that day that that's not true for all police. I was mocked, taunted, and brutalized. And whenever, like the mayor said at the city council meeting, they actually played the clip that my son Chris made from the body cams. And when I watched it, actually a friend came up to me before and she said, we're gonna be doing the video, are you okay? And so reluctantly, I said, yeah, I think I'll be okay, because I've been looking at it when my son had edited and stuff, and I really had a visceral reaction every time I watched it. It was like watching somebody else. And I would say to myself, when they were doing these things, oh, poor Ladonna. I felt so sorry for her. But I had to disassociate from that person that was being brutalized. Particularly Ronni, who is the female police officer that taunted and said she was going to come in the door and rip whatever. And I was frightened. I was terrified. I really was. As I said, I've never had anything to affect me the way this did. And this is the time for justice. This is the time that the police are held to a standard of accountability for all the wrongs that have been done to others and to me. And so I was taken to jail. I was in solitary confinement for a week. That was horrible. I had no shoes, I had no socks. I didn't know what was going on outside of that room. And so after the week, someone took me into the regular pod. But when I was taken to jail and into booking, and then they took me to the solitary confinement, a nurse actually at the jail said, oh, you look so good now, because I had chest pains. I was in there about 2 weeks, and I started having chest pains. I went to the nurse, and she said, you look so much better now. And I said, what do you mean? She said, they dragged you from booking to solitary confinement. I knew I had black and blue marks all the way up my wrist, up to my elbow, on both arms, but I didn't know what happened. I had a fingernail, and she told me, you're going to lose that finger, because my ring finger on the right hand was damaged and was black. I didn't lose a finger, I did lose a nail, but I'm so thankful for people like Mario that's standing for justice. And Steve, and I know that God is doing an awesome thing through this. I'm so thankful for my children. Kendra, Chris, and Cass, they have supported me throughout this. But again, thank you all so much for coming and for showing an interest in this pursuit for justice.
I would just like to say, for those of you who don't know my mother, to know my mother is to love my mother. And she's always stood up for justice. And to see her struggle with trying to pick up the pieces of her life now is very difficult. To see her, a woman that 3 months before this was ziplining in Mexico and she can't even get out of the chair unassisted or walk without a cane now, is extremely difficult for me, my brothers, our families, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren to see her like this. So it has been devastating, but she's very strong. And we will get through this, but there has to be accountability. And we won't stop until we get the accountability we need.
My name is Chris Williams. One of the hardest parts of this experience was when my mom was in jail and my son walked into the room, and I had to explain to him while I was speaking to his grandmother from a jail phone and doing a video chat. He's looking at his grandmother, who had never been in trouble, no criminal history, seminary student, 70 years old, and I'm trying my best to make it make sense, knowing that it doesn't make sense. And to have someone like Officer Ronni Carrocia in my mom's most difficult moment to take advantage of her and berate her and treat her as if it's a joke, playing a game of cat and mouse until she escalates the situation. It doesn't even take extreme training to even get her to do the bare minimum, just to show somewhat of an amount of compassion, just human decency. The minimum could have allowed us to avoid all of this, but she chose not to. And the worst part of it, one of the worst parts is the fact that after the video came out, that the TPD and Chief Franklin actually came out and backed Officer Ronni Carrocia and the actions of the other police officers. So that takes it away from just one individual bad apple, and it speaks to a system where an obvious miscarriage of justice is made, but at the end of the day, they're still going to justify what she did. And it's unconscionable and it's disgusting.
Before I bring up Ms. Paris' church family and her pastor, Bishop Pearson, I do also want to be clear that along with myself and Steve, our other co-counsel Spencer Bryant, and Kim Heckenkemper, who couldn't be here today, are also working on this case. And I just want to put this challenge out to anyone that's listening. Can you imagine if Ms. Paris was a 7-year-old white great-grandmother and had been brutalized in this way? Can you imagine that Chief Franklin or Mayor Bynum would say, hey, that's within policy, nothing's wrong here? Can you imagine if Chief Franklin's grandmother, mother was brutalized this way, that he would feel, oh, this is just fine, it's within policy? Can you imagine if Mayor Bynum, if his mother, his wife, his daughter was treated in the way that Ms. Paris was treated, that he would say, hey, I have confidence in the Tulsa Police Department's investigation, when there's been zero, to our knowledge, zero accountability? We don't believe that officer Carrocia should even be on the force.
Right.
She should be off the force, and she should be criminally charged for her sadistic nature. As Lord Dr. Wright, the city council president, stated, she did all of this on video, knowing she was on video. Some of the things that people maybe have not seen, they say watch the whole video. We've watched all the video. We watched them pull down Ms. Paris' pants and expose her buttocks while a male officer is groping on her for no reason. We saw that. We saw her being outside on a very hot day and she's asking for water and they're saying, no, you won't get any water, you were acting bad. We saw that. We saw them telling her, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes, and you're going to jail. We saw that. We invite everyone to watch the full body cam, as they stated. Watch it all. See everything, the despicable acts that this lady suffered on video. With that, Bishop Pearson, on behalf of Ms. Paris' church family.
Thank you. I've known Ms. Paris for over 40 years. Been upstanding, godly, kind, generous, supportive human being. Tulsa tax-paying, tithe-paying Christian. With Tulsa being in the news this last year for the 100-year recognition of the worst massacre, race massacre in American history, and for all the attention that's been drawn to our city because of Cops, the series, our police force should be especially keen on making a different image for the public. We've lost confidence in it. This is absurd. It's obscene. It is the worst visual that we've seen in recent weeks about a 70-year-old woman, regardless of her race. She's a 70-year-old great-grandmother, a Tulsa citizen in distress, and they knew it. The police officer, I couldn't even watch the video the first couple of times. She was giddy. It was like a game. Mental illness, I think she's mentally ill. She's out of touch with reality. That's psychosis. The entire police department in America, the whole force needs to be reconstructed, deconstructed and reconstructed, because systemically it is out of touch with protecting and serving anymore. The image across the world makes our police look very, very questionable and of ethics and morals and of decency. And so I say, as her pastor, and I took her to the seminary that very day, I was with her all day. Let her off that evening. She left a phone call like 3 o'clock in the morning, which I didn't hear, but I heard the next morning, saying I'm a witch is standing outside of the restroom. That let me know that she was in great mental distress. And so did the police officer, who said, oh, this is great. I love my job. I'm going to have fun. Oh, she was giddy like a child in the candy store. That is not acceptable. We have to make a change. We need to do it now. Mayor Bynum, City Council, leaders, police chief, police sheriff, all of you, reconsider what you're doing, because we're not going to give up until we see change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
When I saw the video, I'm not gonna lie, it made me angry. Now, we aren't police haters. I mean, my stepbrother, he's been a police officer for a very, very long time. And we understand that there are police officers out there that do a great job and do serve and protect. But in this instance, it's, I think it's a microcosm of what the bigger picture is. And she probably felt like she could do that because she's done that numerous times. I mean, that's not the first time that she stepped out and acted the way she did. And you can see in the video of her partners, kind of, digress her and said, we're just gonna let her do what she does. That's who she is. So I think that in itself is a problem. I think there's an issue in the department with them feeling like they're telling on each other, for correcting each other's behavior. And I feel like it kind of starts there, with her fellow officers. We all appreciate the police and the job that they do, when they do it correctly. Because that is a job that, when done incorrectly, can cause situations. So that's all I have to say.
Appreciate that, Cash. Absolutely. Before I open it up for a few questions, Cash brought up a good point of the other officers that were at the scene. And some of those officers are also named in this lawsuit, particularly Galen Root and Ty Burns. Because, as he stated, they didn't come and de-escalate and say, hey, what are you doing? That's not the way we should do things. In fact, Officer Carrocia, she actually said, I hope people was coming to the scene, and she said, well, I hope it's a certain officer, which was rude, because he gonna knock down that door. So they had a whole plan. And as Cass said, clearly this is something that they do on a daily basis. And again, the phone calls that Steve and I and our officers receive on a daily basis will blow your mind. We simply don't have the manpower, the capacity to even properly return all the calls we receive from people who have the same type of stories. And I do thank God for the video. Because could you imagine where we would be if there was no video? They would have said this lady was threatening to burn them down, that she was violent, and she deserved all 9 of those charges. She'd probably be facing life in prison right now if it wasn't for the video. So we do thank God for the video, but if we need to move past that, we need accountability. We need an officer to be off the force. She should be charged criminally, and the city needs to be held accountable, starting from the top down. I want to be clear that Mayor Bynum, pursuant to Title 29, Section 1, Section 101 of the City of Tulsa Municipal Code, is a final policymaker of TPD. It starts at the top.
Yes.
We need leaders to lead from the top down. And hopefully this lawsuit can motivate them to do just that. And with that, I'll open it up for just a few questions.
What are you guys hoping to get out of the lawsuit?
Well, again, we want to get justice and we want to get accountability. We want Ms. Paris to be made whole. I mean, she has medical bills. She has permanent physical injuries. She's in getting additional psychological care. She's on medication for this incident. We want this city to say that this is not in policy. We want a judge to say this is not constitutional policing. This is unacceptable. We want to have an opportunity, so they wouldn't do it voluntarily. This could have been handled a whole different way. When they saw this video, they could have put a call out to Chris. We weren't even involved.
Yeah.
Chris had been trying to talk with them for months.
Yeah.
Since October. They ignored him.
Yeah.
They could have sat down with them and said, you know what, this should have never happened. We're disciplining this officer. We'll take care of your medical bills. And we wouldn't even be here today. But instead, they said, this is how we police in Tulsa. And we want to be an international city and talk about Bob Dylan locations and opening new businesses, while people here like Ms. Paris are living under terrorism. Terrorism. Each and every day. Let's talk about that, Tulsa. Yes. Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, this comes on the heels of last week, TPD released their community policing evaluation, where they said TPD has a lot of work. Did that have any influence at all on this lawsuit, or, is it going to have any influence?
Well, since, and how many studies have come out about TPD over the last 20 years? Numerous studies. Just over the last 5 years, since the shooting, the unnecessary, unjust shooting of Terrence Crutchell when he had his hands up in the air. You have reports from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, national organization. You have reports from Human Rights Watch, an international organization dealing with human abuses. You have reports from the Equality Indicator reports, which is the city of Tulsa's own document. And each year, the policing gets worse and worse and worse. I think it's at 30 now, out of 100. So this is just another document that states what we already know. We're living this. The citizens of Tulsa are living what these documents are stating. And this is why, again, yes, I will say, this is why Mayor Bynum is a part of this litigation, because he has the responsibility and the authority to make a change, and he hasn't done it.
There are actually more non-blacks in city council complaining about this, so it's not a racial thing.
That's right.
It's all of Tulsans.
That's right.
Can you describe the extent of her injuries again, and wondering why you're not filing criminal charges against the officer involved?
Well, I'm not the DA. We're just civil lawyers. I wish we did have the ability to file criminal charges. So we would love for, and we think DA Kunzweiler, maybe you can ask him that question, why he has not filed criminal charges on something that's so blatant. I'm sure that I would love to know what that answer would be. We think it's very blatant, and if the DA would not file the charges, we think the United States Attorney should file the charges, because this was a civil rights violation. She specifically knew that she was having a mental health breakdown. She said she sold 85. She sold 85, and Bishop Carson Pearson just stated. She was so giddy about it. It was disgusting. And yet she did what she did. I think it's a federal criminal civil rights violation, if you ask me.
This is a civil suit, correct?
This is a civil rights lawsuit.
It's a civil rights lawsuit. Can you outline the extent of her injuries again?
She has injuries to her leg, to her shoulders, to her like I said, her fingers, her back.
My teeth. Yeah.
They broke some of her teeth. So these are things she's dealing with. She's walking with a cane now. She's never walked with a cane before.
And there are 3 named parties in the lawsuit? Forgive me, I haven't seen the lawsuit
No,
itself.
that's fine. Great question. There's actually 5 named parties.
Okay, and who are they?
It's Ronni Carrocia, who is the lady on video smiling as big as possible, saying, I love my job, as she takes her foot and jiggles on the door. It's outrageous. The more I think about it, it's just outrageous. Her activity is actually outrageous. Daylan Root, Daylan, Ty Burns, the city of Tulsa, and George Theron Bynum IV, better known as GT Bynum, the mayor, in his individual capacity.
What is the next step after the lawsuit has been filed officially? What happens next?
Well, we find out what our judge is, we'll get into discovery, and try to get this case to trial as soon as possible. As we know, this is just a long-standing policy and practice here. As Lord Dr. Wright, City Council President, stated, it's a practice here. We hope to stop this practice. You know, Steve and I and our co-counsel, we would like to not receive as many phone calls because we believe so strongly in this living in a society that's equitable and safe for everyone, and not have to continue to hear about our citizens being brutalized. Yes, sir, Deon.
This morning, the mayor spoke at the Bob Dylan grand opening, the Bob Dylan Center, saying that the city is seeking to close racial disparities. You mentioned the Equality Indicators report, which shows that the police brutality rates are actually going in the opposite direction that we want it to be going in. Do you see a day where you might be seeking federal oversight in the form of a federal consent decree for the department?
Well, we would welcome any day for the Department of Justice to come in and investigate the Tulsa Police Department. We certainly definitely need the consent decree. We've needed it my whole entire life here. And it's not just based off subjective what I feel, it's based upon the evidence. And so, and I like what, just to highlight it, yes, I do believe that if Ms. Paris was Caucasian, she'd been treated differently. But the real issue in this case is her mental health issue.
Yes.
Because she was behind that door, and they said she's 85. She's so 85. Which means she's having a mental health issue. And they haven't talked about the CERT team, the community response team. And they say, oh, well, it's just a few of those guys, but you know, we really don't, they're not here right now. I mean, so that's really the crux of the matter here, that someone can have a mental health breakdown, and any of us could have it, and be treated in that manner.
And when are you going to file the lawsuit? Later this afternoon?
As soon as this press conference is over with. All right, thank you so much.